Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, because there will be a global audience turning in for this. I'm coming live with Mr. James Baker. And my name is Arjun Mahadevan. I'm the founder and CEO of doola.com, a business in a box. And before we jump in, there are two certainties in life, death and taxes. I can't help you prevent death, although I can recommend eat your vitamins and exercise. But when it comes to taxes, that's something where our guest today has a ton of expertise. Now, my name on social is Mr. LLC. We might as well call Mr. James Baker Mr. International Tax or Mr. Global Tax. James, thank you for coming on. And I want to make this the most action or value-packed 10 minutes that exists on YouTube when it comes to content. That's an ambitious goal, but I think we can prove people right or wrong here. So let's actually dive in. James, very first question. Why should people trust the answers you're about to give? Can you actually just give some credibility? Please do not be modest. Who are you? Why should we listen to you when it comes to taxes?
Very good. Thank you for having me here. So I'm about to enter into my 20th year of doing taxes, almost primarily for international people. So I worked with a lot of foreign people living in the U.S. for a couple of years. Then I worked with large multinational, foreign-owned multinationals. And for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been working with foreign entrepreneurs who have businesses in the U.S. And there's a lot of bad advice out there. And because this is my primary type of client that I'm working with, all of the research and all the support that I'm trying to provide is really for the Indian guy with the LLC or the guy from whatever Belarus who has a corporation. Is for these guys specifically, and I've run the gambit of taxes and worked with the IRS on issues, fixed problems. So I've been doing this for a long time, and I have a lot of documented information on the internet about it too, a lot of research I share and all that stuff. So thanks for having me here.
Amazing. Let's dive in. Again, most value-packed 10 minutes on YouTube when it comes to taxes. Let's start with, I am a non-U.S. single-member LLC. So I live outside the U.S. Let's say I live in India, for example, and I decide to form an LLC in Wyoming or Delaware, but let's say it's Wyoming for now. Can you share what I, as a founder, have to know when it comes to filing taxes in the U.S.?
So from an income tax perspective, whatever state your LLC in doesn't really matter. That's just a legal entity. They're disregarded for tax purposes. If James Baker has an LLC, James Baker pays taxes. Now, if you're Bobby from India and you don't have an LLC, you don't pay U.S. taxes. If you do have an LLC, it doesn't change whether you pay taxes or not. If your activities are all performed outside of the U.S., that would be it's sourced based on where you're performing the service, and you can look at non-resident sourcing. I get a lot of questions about that. Now, the question was what forms they have to file. Was that the question?
What taxes
So
do I have to pay, or what forms do I have to file?
okay, so the taxes really, if it's all service based, you're doing it all abroad. There's no taxes to pay. There is some compliance to deal with, and if you're doing e-commerce but you're selling it all and managing it all from abroad, that's another thing where if you don't have a effectively connected income with a U.S. trade or business, which means like stores, the most conservative, or I guess the most conservative interpretation of this would be like a retail store. If you have a retail store in the U.S., you pay taxes in the U.S. If you have real estate in the U.S., you have to pay taxes in the U.S. Now, if you're just a guy with an LLC, you have to do your state renewal each year. You have to do the annual filing, which Doola does for you. It's really easy. They make it super easy for you. You have to do the IRS compliance. Now, if you have an LLC and there's only one owner, you have to do this pro forma Form 1120 with a 5472. It's only reporting related party transactions. It doesn't report your income or your expenses. And if you have, and that's due on April 15th each year from January 1st to December 31st. And if you have more than one owner, if you and your brother are 50-50 partners on this LLC, you file different forms, Form 1065, and that's due on March 15th. It's a little bit of a different endeavor, but the tax rules are still the same for that. So it's really the state renewal. You have to do some kind of IRS compliance, whether it's one of those two forms. If you have a corporation or an LLC elected to pay taxes as a C Corp, then you file just a form 1120 with whatever required stuff to it, and that shows your income, your expenses, and it pays taxes. So a corporation does pay taxes. So you have to do your renewal, your annual compliance, and then the BOI report looks like it's not going to be required anymore. Maybe it will be. We'll see. But it's kind of pretty simple.
Amazing. Wow. I'm going to summarize here for everyone. Non-U.S. single-member LLC, Form 5472 with a pro forma 1120. If you are a non-U.S. C Corp, there's an 1120. And if you have a multiple-member LLC, that's you and your brother or you and two people, there's this 1065 or 1065 that has to be filed. Now, I actually want to do a double-click into something you mentioned. E-commerce is booming globally today. Let's say you are an international founder with an e-commerce business, Shopify or Amazon. Does anything you shared change for that specific vertical or for an e-commerce entrepreneur?
Well, there's a different level of risk, right? And there's different levels of exposure here. I like to cite examples, real world examples from myself. I have clients all over the world. So if someone from India pays me, I'm not paying taxes in India. If I sell a pair of shoes to someone in Switzerland, if I mail shoes there, I'm not going to pay income taxes in Switzerland. The same applies in the reverse. And now if I sell a lot of shoes to Switzerland, maybe I have to pay VAT. And that's where sales taxes would apply, and that's something that's a little bit different than income taxes. The biggest tax generally on portion of what you pay is going to be the income tax. And if you're managing and running everything from abroad, you're drop shipping, or if you have a 3PL that you don't own, then and I can get into more specifics, but that's when you would still not be paying taxes in the U.S. Income taxes. Now, if you're there's different levels of sales to get you to an income tax nexus. I mean a sales tax nexus. Most of the tools you would be selling on will do it for you. So Shopify will calculate it for you. Stripe will calculate it. They bought TaxJar, and if you sell on Amazon or Walmart, they actually take care of all the taxes for you. So it gets a little bit nuanced depending on what you're doing, but the short answer is if you're doing everything remotely and abroad, you probably don't have to pay income taxes. If you're doing a ton of sales, you should probably get a second opinion. Like if you're selling over $1 million a year, it's worth just getting some kind of consult. But if you're just getting started, I wouldn't worry about it and just worry on growing the business as quickly as you can.
Incredible. We actually got a bonus answer in there in terms of defining economic versus physical nexus. So to summarize here, depending on a certain threshold, either in revenue hit in a state or number of transactions, that's when you might have to pay sales tax in the US. And then also, if you live in the US, that is what establishes physical nexus. Is that correct?
Well, there's nexus is the term of being required to like comply and pay taxes is the concept of nexus. Physical nexus means you're doing business in a state. So that would be if you had a sales office or if you had or a store. If you had a retail store in Arizona, you would have physical nexus in Arizona. Now, if you just ship stuff into Arizona, you wouldn't have a physical nexus based on shipping. Since 2017, if you sell a certain amount, you could have an economic nexus. And one thing I will kind of correct you on is you don't really pay sales taxes. You charge your clients and remit it. So if you do it right, it's extra compliance and it's an extra headache, but it's not an extra tax that you pay. And in the U.S., sales taxes are 6 to 8%. Generally speaking, and if you do it the right way, when you qualify, you register in the state, you put it on the platform, they charge a sales tax. When I check out, I don't even see it, and then you pay it to the state. So if you do it right, it shouldn't be an actual tax for you. It's for your customers.
Incredibly helpful. Now, I don't want to forget about folks living in the US. So I want to ask the same
Oh yeah.
question now for a US single member LLC. I live in New York City. I'm a single member LLC. What taxes do I have to file? And then also, let's say me and a friend also have a multiple member LLC. Could you walk through for both of those cases what filings are required and then what taxes are required too?
Great. So when determining whether an individual has to file taxes in the U.S. as a resident, if you're a non-resident, you only file in the U.S. based on what you earn in the U.S., which in the previous examples we were saying was none. Now, if you're a citizen or a green card holder, you have to pay tax in the U.S. Or if you're a citizen, a green card holder, or a permanent resident, you just live in the U.S., you have to pay tax on your worldwide income, report everything from everywhere. So just like if you had a side hustle, having an LLC doesn't change it. You still report it on Schedule C in your Form 1040, and the LLC with doola doesn't have to cost a lot extra to have. It gives you extra professionalism, and it gives you tax flexibility in the future. Because in the U.S., it's obviously more particular in how you pay your taxes. Just like Bobby from India has to get his own Indian tax account and figure out his stuff in India, then you have to do your own thing in the U.S. But the short answer is you have to file it on Schedule C, pay your payroll taxes, your self-employment taxes, and then when you're making, let's say you make $50,000 or $100,000, then maybe you want to meet with an accountant and see how you can pay less taxes. But it all goes on your 1040. If you just own a single member LLC, there's not really any extra filing you have to do as an American with an LLC. It's no extra filing. It's really easy. There's not really any reason not to just open one up if you want to start a side hustle, because doola makes it pretty easy and affordable. Now, for a multi-member LLC, you have to file a separate tax return, which is an extra thing to do. And you do probably have to work with someone. They have online softwares that'll do it for you, but I wouldn't just mail the forms in. it's going to cost you almost more in penalties when you do it wrong because it's needlessly complex. But that's basic. But the short answer of a multi-member LLC is if John and Steve own 50%, the business makes $100,000. You show income, expenses. There's $100,000, and it says John's part's 50, Steve's 50. That comes on a Form K1, and then you put it on your tax forms, your 1040 on Schedule E, and it goes and you pay tax on it.
Incredible. I have one more question here that we're going to summarize. Can you define what an S corp is? Like, what is an S corp? How does it work? And then, if you do an S corp, what does that mean, and what taxes would you file? One more bonus question here to actually really throw it on you. When should someone do an S corp election? Who can do it too?
Yeah, so the S Corp election isn't really a DIY thing. You can do that if you're really inclined. It's really not, though. So an S corporation is not a real entity. An S corporation is an LLC or a corporation that files a form to be treated as an S corporation for IRS purposes, and it's still pass-through taxation. If your S corp makes $100,000, then you pay tax on $100,000 if you own it. Now the difference is an S corp can save you on payroll taxes because when you make $100,000 in a Schedule C, you're paying the full 15.3% on payroll taxes on that S corp. I mean on that LLC. Now if you make an S election, that's not the distributions and the money you take from it are not subject to payroll taxes. So you essentially save 15.3%. However, you have to run payroll and pay yourself a reasonable compensation, which is the IRS is determined reasonably in a bunch of different ways. But you'd pay payroll taxes on that, but the gap is where you're saving. So if you make $100,000, you pay yourself a $50,000 salary, you're still saving $7,500 on the $50,000 that's not subject to that 15.3% payroll tax. Again, it's more filings, more forms. Generally, if you're making at least over 50,000, maybe 100,000, it might make sense to do this because you'll save money, but you're gonna have to pay for payroll service. Don't mess around with payroll. The IRS is very aggressive with payroll if you do it wrong, and then you have to do the S corp forms 1120S. But if you just tell the state an S corp is not the same. You have to file a form 2553 to be elected as an S corp, and you pick the date it should start. Again, it's not a DIY thing. I would recommend.
Incredible.
I would recommend setting up one last thing. I would recommend setting up the LLC because then you have the option to make it an S corp later or after the fact. But if you don't have an LLC, you can't make it an S corp later. You have to have the LLC first.
Nothing to add there. That was money. Final bonus question. Can you explain, like I'm 5, what bookkeeping and accounting are? Do I need them? Are they optional? What is bookkeeping versus accounting? Can you just explain for someone who's either starting or scaling, when do I need it? What do these terms mean? And how can it actually help my business?
Sure. The most important thing when you're starting a business with bookkeeping and accounting is to have dedicated accounts for business and for personal stuff, not to commingle your expenses. So accounting is really easy. If you have one account that's all business stuff, you're paying for supplies, you're paying for inventory, your clients pay you, that's this account, and then you have this account where you go to Olive Garden and you buy hats, and that's this account. So you want to have separate accounts. It makes the accounting really easy. You can use different levels of software. Bookkeeping and accounting is really just looking at the transactions and saying what the stuff is. You're saying that's income, that's supplies, that's cost of goods sold, that's technology, that's internet, whatever. And then sorting it, and then the summary of that is what you put on your taxes. So the big tip is to just don't commingle your activities and have business stuff in a business account, personal stuff in the personal account. And then the accounting is really easy. For some clients, if you have a really small business, you don't need to go and crush it every month. Some people do it at year end, and you kind of know how much money you made by how much money is in your account. But you still need to, if you don't commingle it, you can do it at the end of the year in Excel, or you can use software to know how it's going every month.
Incredible. That was, I think, the most jam-packed crash course, and I will commend you. You explained those in ways that maybe not a 5-year-old could understand, but a 7-year-old or 10-year-old. So huge kudos there. James, where can people find you if they want to learn more?
Thanks, man. Well, I just featured you on my channel, James Baker CPA. I have my own YouTube channel, and I talk about this stuff for non-residents all the time. I appreciate you giving me the chance for a shout-out and the opportunity to come on here and talk about and answer your questions. So I'm jamesbakercpa.com, and on my YouTube is great.
Amazing. And for anyone watching, if you have additional questions, comment down below if the people demand it. And James is open to it. We will do more sessions like this. So comment down below. James, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Happy to be here anytime.